Is Knights of the Zodiac going to be the next great anime live-action adaptation, or do we have another Dragon Ball Evolution on our hands? Well, I just got back home from the theater watching it, so let's talk about it. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and for those that are not super familiar with Knights of the Zodiac, or Saint Seiya as it's also known, I want to share a little bit of information about this new movie that just came out, where it comes from, who's making it, all that good stuff. And then, of course, as I do with all my reviews, I'm going to go over the pros, the things I liked about the movie, followed by the cons, the things that just didn't really work so well for me. And then finally, I'm going to share who I think should be watching this movie, if anyone. If that kind of thing sounds cool to you and you want to see more movie reviews just like this, make sure you subscribe. So to let you know a little bit of information about Knights of the Zodiac, aka Saint Seiya, it is based on a manga and anime that all started back in, I think, 1985. It then moved around the world, and even though it never really got super popular here in the United States, it did get massively successful in some other countries, in South America, in Mexico, in China, of course in Japan, and a few other countries. It was honestly one of the big animes of the time, right up there with Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon. Now, it did, of course, come to the States. It was on Toonami late at night, and I do remember watching a few episodes here and there, but it didn't last long, and it eventually was just canceled. So now, all these decades later, they are finally making an actual live action movie about this very beloved anime. So what's the movie about? Well, in this live action adaptation, you follow a young girl who is basically the reincarnation of Athena, who is the goddess of war and wisdom. You also follow a basically street orphan named Seiya, whose ultimate destiny is to protect Athena. Now, throughout the movie, we find out that there are some villains who are trying to destroy Athena and the young girl who is being inhabited by this goddess. And then it becomes up to Saint Seiya to try to save her. Now, there are a lot of similarities between this and the original manga and anime, but not entirely. It's not beat for beat a remake by any means. And there are some new characters that are introduced in the movie, especially one that's played by Famke Janssen, who you might know from playing Jean Grey in the X-Men movies back in the day. She plays a bit of a villain character. You also have Sean Bean, as well as Mark Dacascos, who I love. He's an old school martial arts movie guy. But the main cast, the main actor who plays Saint Seiya, is someone who goes by the name Mackenyu. I believe his full name is Mackenyu Maeda, and he's a Japanese American actor. He's been in a number of things over the past few years. I'm not really familiar with him though myself, but if you are, definitely let me know in the comments. You also have Madison Iseman. I think that's how you pronounce her last name, Iseman or Iseman perhaps. She plays Sienna, which is the young girl who has had Athena reincarnated into her. And there's another character, the actor is Diego Tinoco, I think, and he's working kind of on the side of the villain. I know there are some people that are familiar with his work. I'm not. These are some pretty young actors and actresses who haven't been in a ton of things. One of the things that did stand out to me, so the movie is being directed by Tomasz Baginski, who is a Polish director, and I think this is his actual directorial debut as far as in a feature film. He's done some shorts and music videos here and there, but this is his first real feature film movie that he's going to be doing. But that aside, what really jumped out to me was who the stunt coordinator is for this movie. And that is somebody by the name of Andy Chang, who actually was on the Jackie Chan stunt team. So if you're a fan of stunts at all, you might be familiar with, of course, Jackie Chan, but more than that, his team of stunt people that he's worked with over the past several decades, and a lot of them have gone on to do their own things and to be very successful in the stunt world. So Andy Chang has worked on a bunch of Jackie Chan's movies, including all the Rush Hour movies. Most recently, he worked on Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, which had some awesome martial arts in it as well. So you have him as the stunt coordinator and the fight coordinator in this movie as well. So I think that's enough of the setup there. Let me tell you the things that I liked about this movie, and then of course I'll get into the cons. So speaking of Andy Chang and speaking of the stunt team and the fight scenes in this movie were pretty dope. A lot of the hand-to-hand combat was very creative. They didn't do a ton of cutting away. The actor who plays Seiya in the movie himself does a lot of his own stunts, and so I really appreciate that they stick on the actor and show him actually going through the motions, as opposed to what they do in like a lot of movies like Taken, where Liam Neeson is trying to scale a fence and there's 23 cuts in this one scene of him jumping over a fence. I'm not joking. That's an actual scene from the movie. But in this movie, you actually see the entire fight sequence go off. And there are some cuts here and there, you know, just for certain moves that maybe are not particularly easy to do, but for the most part, you're getting to see the action, which I really appreciate. And like I said, a lot of the martial arts is not just punch and kick. There's a lot of really cool flips and unique moves and interesting movement that they do throughout the scenes. So I really appreciate what Andy Chang did there. I also like some of the acting, but not all of it. And we'll get into that more in the negatives, unfortunately. But Sean Bean, I thought, was very good in this movie. Of course, he's Sean Bean. He's one of the greats of our modern time. And I thought he did a really, really good job in this. I also really enjoyed seeing Mark Dacascos. I'm a big fan of his from back in the day. And I just like seeing him. It seems like he really enjoys what he does nowadays. Where if there's a fun action movie and they offer it to him, I think he just jumps on. I think he just really enjoys doing these kinds of movies. And it really comes across in his character. You can tell he's having a good time. Now, unfortunately, aside from those few things, there's not a ton of positives that I left with after watching this movie. I mean, I do enjoy seeing more live action representation and recreations of anime. I'm a giant anime fan. I have been my entire life. You can probably see some of my Dragon Ball Z figures that I have on the wall behind me. There's also some Studio Ghibli stuff and some Pokemon stuff. A lot of that I got in Japan, which is pretty dope. But yes, I'm a giant anime fan. And so anytime that they are going to take one of the classic animes and attempt to turn it into something new and interesting, I'm going to be down to watch it. But unfortunately, as often as they do that, it doesn't always work out. And I don't think it worked out in this case. So let's get into the negatives. And I'm really sorry, but there are going to be a few. So for one, we'll talk about the CG. Now, this movie isn't the highest budget film. I believe the budget was about $60 million, but still, $60 million is $60 million. Who are we kidding? But even with that budget, even having millions and millions of dollars, and with a cast that's probably not getting paid a ton of money, I don't know what their contracts were, but I would imagine the bulk of the cast are relatively unknowns, so they're probably not making a ton of money. Sean Bean probably got paid out for sure, but with a $60 million budget, I feel like the CG should have been a lot better than it was. Honestly, if I had to describe the level of CG quality in this movie, it reminded me of, and you've probably seen this on YouTube, there are a number of channels that do cool anime-inspired CG implemented fight scenes. They do it a lot with like Dragon Ball and things like that. It looked like that. It looked like something that a couple of high school kids worked on over their summer break. Not entirely. There were a couple of cool shots, but overall, there were moments where I was watching the CG and I was like, wow, this just looks like a YouTube video. This looks like something someone slapped together in After Effects. And that's not a thought you want to have when you're watching a $60 million movie. Another thing that jumped out to me was, although I mentioned Sean Bean's acting was fantastic, and also Mark Dacascos was great, and Famke Janssen I thought was pretty good, even though they all held their own, the main cast, who I would say are the three main characters in this movie, were not good. And because you had them acting next to someone like Sean Bean, it became even clearer that they were not up to snuff as far as their acting talent is concerned. I mean, I don't like to crap on people when they have a chosen profession. Obviously, we can't all be Sean Bean, but if you're going to cast some people to be the lead characters in your film, if they are not yet up to that level of acting quality or up to a reasonable level of acting quality, don't cast them. You know, and that's not to say that they will never be that good. That just means that they're not there yet. They need some work. And so when you're following around the main characters of Seiya and Sienna and even Nero for the bulk of the movie, or even from large swaths of the movie, it's painful. It's painful to watch. I would say it reminded me of watching a CW show. If you've ever watched like some of those CW shows where it's just a bunch of pretty people who can barely act, I would say it was like that, but in actuality, it was probably worse than that, which sucks. Now, I won't say it was all their fault, right? Some of the dialogue that was written for them, I mean, it was rough. And the fact that Sean Bean could barely make it seem realistic and interesting says a lot. So if you're going to go into this being a lesser talented actor or actress and you're being given this pretty poor dialogue, it's just not going to go well for you. Really though, there were moments where I was worried my eyes were going to roll right out of my head. The last thing I'll touch on as far as negatives are concerned, because I don't want to crap all over this movie, was the pacing. The pacing was way off on this, and not in a way that I think would be typical. So a lot of times when I talk about pacing, there will be moments in a movie where it's like, you know what, you could have cut that whole scene. You could have trimmed this movie up by 15 minutes and it would have flowed a lot better. That is the case in this movie, but it's not exclusively the case. So there are large scenes that can be trimmed up way better or just cut out entirely for the speed and flow of the movie. But there are also scenes that I felt should have been added. So it almost comes across as if we needed a complete rewrite of this script from soup to nuts all the way through. This is not something that can just be fixed by removing a scene or even adding a scene or two. This is something that you have set up the flow of this film and the arc of this story in such a manner that for 45 minutes in the middle of the film, people are falling asleep. I almost fell asleep. The guy sitting a few seats down from me did fall asleep. I heard him snoring. So it's like, if you are losing people, I never fall asleep anywhere. Look, I can barely fall asleep in my own bed at night. And if I'm dozing off in the middle of your film, an action film with a bunch of martial arts and explosions and CG, if you can't keep my attention, that's a problem. And so to say it was a pacing issue, yes, generally it is. But more than that, it is a writing issue. Your script is a mess. And it's just really unfortunate because I wanted to love this movie. I wanted it to succeed. But it sounds like, based on what I've seen and also based on what I've seen online as far as some of the numbers that are coming back from overseas. So this movie released in, I think, South America and Japan a few weeks ago, and it's not making any money. And it doesn't seem like it's going to do very well here in the States either. So unfortunately, for those of us that wanted to see Saint Seiya Knights of the Zodiac succeed, it doesn't seem like this is going to be the movie for that. You can definitely tell that they were pushing for a sequel the way that the movie wrapped up, but I just don't know if that's going to happen. So all in all, who, if anybody, would I recommend this movie for? You know, that's a really tough one. If you're not already a fan of Knights of the Zodiac, then I don't think you should watch this movie because I don't think this is representative of the quality of the actual story of Knights of the Zodiac. I would recommend you go back and watch the original anime because I think you're going to get a lot more out of that. And if you are already a fan of Knights of the Zodiac, this movie might hurt your feelings. So if you can put that aside, if you can just go into it and accept that it's not going to live up to the quality of what you've come to expect from Knights of the Zodiac, and you can just go into it with a blank slate and be like, you know what, I'm going to turn off my brain and just enjoy this and be happy that it exists, then go for it. Go watch this movie. But otherwise, if you fall into any of the other categories, I think this is one to skip. But of course, these are all just my thoughts, my opinions. I'm just some random dude on the internet. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you seen Knights of the Zodiac? Are you a big fan of the original source material? Do you feel that this lived up to that or not? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments below. I definitely want to hear it. Also, I should say I am just a few subscribers away from hitting 1,000 on this channel. So if you want to do a good deed for the day and you think that these kind of videos are cool, maybe consider subscribing. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one. All right. Be good.